My name is Faye Helmsmore, and I was born and raised in Stanley, North Carolina, just a small town, and it's between Charlotte and Lincolnton and Gastonia. But to me, it was just the best place in the world to run and play and be with so many nice people. The main thing in my life was being among Christian people, and that was what we had there in the little town of Stanley, because there were more churches than any little place I know of. We were surrounded with churches, and I got to know about Jesus the very first thing when I was just a baby. I was taught Jesus loves me, and I love that song, and I always will. That's my favorite song. And I mean, I have written a bunch of them, but none of them compare with that sweet song, Jesus Loves Me. Well, anyway, when I was born, I had 3 months colic, and I cried for 3 months. And I thought, I know people got tired of that, and I thought I didn't get off to a good start. But when I got well from that, I never have cried much. I've been a happy little girl, and I had such love all around from my aunts that lived next door, my grandmother and grandfather. We lived with them because that was back when, before World War II, and a lot of young couples moved in with their parents because they were just beginning in their life together. And that was just what they did. So when my sister was born, she was born in Cherryville. But then when they found out I was going to be born, we moved to my grandparents in Stanley. But my mother was going to school in Charlotte. She was taking a business course, and she loved shorthand and that typing and all of that, and she was really good at it. My daddy was working on building. And so we moved in with our grandparents, and Papa had all these animals out back. Horse, he had a racehorse that he got off a racetrack, and it could really go. And my mother was, she wasn't afraid of anything. She'd ride that racehorse and go through Stanley, and people would say, I'm going to tell your daddy on you. Said, you going too fast. But she had a little wild streak in her, I guess. So anyway, we just lived a normal life, going to church all the time. That was the friendliest little town. In fact, we have a name of the friendly place. And that we deserved that because that's what we've had all my life. I went to the Lutheran with my mother and her aunts and family, and Papa went to the Methodist, and it was the same distance. The Lutheran church was like a block away, and the Methodist church was up the street just a little ways. And whenever I wanted to, I'd go with Papa. It didn't matter. We were going to church, and that's what I've known all of my life, to believe in God. I was brought up to believe, and I couldn't have lived any time without knowing that I had Jesus with me. Well, anyway, so much happened. I looked out one day. I had an uncle that he was old enough he could have gone into service, but he was going to get to college in Raleigh. He was coming home, and he was killed in an automobile accident. And it was in a rumble seat, an old-time car, and it closed in on him and crushed him. And so Mama and Papa, that was their first son. And he didn't know what he was going to do exactly. Everybody said that he'd be a preacher, and then they said he'd be a doctor. a lawyer. He had so much that he was smart and had such a wonderful personality. He could have been anything he wanted to be, but he was killed on his way coming home for Thanksgiving. And I didn't know. I was 4 months old. Mama held me. My grandmother held me. And she grieved over her son, but she would rock me and love me. And I had a feeling when I got older that I kind of helped Mama fill a void, that she was feeling so sorry and so sad about her son getting killed. And she rocked me and rocked me. But anyway, I had a wonderful time with my grandparents and living there on the street in Stanley. And so that was the way I grew up, knowing Jesus. I mean, that was just the main person in my life. And I knew everything would be all right as long as we had Jesus in our hearts and minds. But anyway, I saw this other uncle of mine that was younger. I saw him after that standing and talking seriously with his good friend. And I was bigger then. I was about 5 years old, I guess, or bigger. But I thought, what are they so serious about? This is the uncle that had ridden me on the bicycle up and down the streets, and he had us doing tricks out there. He'd have me to stand there, and he'd come flying down through the street and have me to. He'd hold his hand out, and I would grab his hand, and he'd swing me up on his back. I was a little tomboy. I climbed the trees. I had the best time. And my Uncle Jack would show me a good time, and he had a rope that he'd pull me up in the trees, and he had a little stand up there that we could sit down up there in that. He was just the best uncle. And my sister, 2.5 years older than me, was so different from me, but we were very close, very close. She looked like a little doll because she had her dresses just right, starched and fixed up real nice. And there I was. They didn't have many blue jeans then, but I had pants of some sort. Mama and them would make me things. And I would climb trees, and Jack would he had me doing all kinds of tricks out there, jumping on the bicycles and riding with him, riding the horses, climbing the trees. I had the best time all over the place, and I felt kind of sorry for my sister because I thought she's not having too good a time sitting in there at the piano. And she was having a good time because she learned so much and did so well that when she grew up, she played the organ at the Lutheran church, that big pipe organ, for 50 years. She played that organ till she was past playing. And there, what I did didn't amount to that much, because I loved dancing and I loved art. But now Sis was making a show, and she was helping every Sunday at church and everything. But you know what? I was having the best time. And I felt sorry for my sister because I thought she's not enjoying life like I am, because I'd get to dance, and I learned all the dances, and I'd get best dancer at school. And I don't care what kind. I didn't like ballet. I hate to say it because it's pretty and everything, but that wasn't for me. As I grew older, I even liked to jitterbug. But now tap dance, that was the thing. At school, they would have me to tap dance between the acts at school. I had a good friend, Becky Craig, that would get on one side of the stage and I'd get on the other, and we'd go trucking across that stage and get in the middle and tap dance and have the best time. And I thought I was enjoying my life. Now, Sis enjoyed hers, so that was just the difference in the sisters. But we loved each other so much. We slept together every night. We talked to each other. We were best friends, but we just had different likes and dislikes. Well, anyway, as I got a little older, I saw my uncle talking to one of his friends, and they were so serious, and I thought, what in the world could they be talking about? And I found out that World War II had just happened. The war, Japanese, and all, it was so sad. And these boys thought, we're old enough, we're going to have to go in the war. We're going to have to go in the service. And I wondered what Jack and his friend, why they were so sad. And their mama and papa had just lost one son. And I thought, oh my goodness, I can't stand the thoughts of them losing Jack, my good buddy that's taken the time to play with me, take me riding on the bicycle and do all these things. And I thought, oh, this is a sad time. Well, then I heard that my daddy's work was going to take him away from Stanley. He worked out of Charlotte, and it was, since the war started, they needed barracks for all these servicemen that had to go in. Well, my daddy was a builder, and he would get these crews of men together. He got them, people he knew from his hometown of Cherryville and Mount Holly, Alexis, all around. He got men that weren't going in the service, and they had to go off from home. So I ended up, and my sisters, well, any of them that were working as building these barracks. So I had to leave my friends, and that was sad because I knew everybody and loved everybody, and going off to new places. In the first place, my daddy went to Fort Bragg down in, wasn't Raleigh, it was close to Raleigh. And we went to school there, and I was there in 3rd grade. There were some things that we did. My daddy and mother took us out to see the polo games since we liked horses. And it was, we enjoyed that. And I remember you would park the car up near where you had your polo games. And we had a front row, and we got to see, and this pretty horse, real pretty horse, stepped on one of those hard wooden balls, the polo ball, and popped its leg off, and it was just hanging on by some skin. And it was right there in front of our car. And, oh, that was a terrible thing to see. Well, they had to call the game off, the polo game off, because they were going to have to put the horse down. And so I remember that the man's name was Taylor. And the reason I remembered it, we had a doctor in Stanley, a Dr. Taylor, and I thought that stuck in my mind. And so then another one was Stanley. So I thought, now I'll remember that. So I had 2 things that reminded me of that terrible polo game that I went to see, and they had to take the saddle off that horse and had everybody to leave before they, I guess, were going to have to shoot it because it couldn't walk. Anyway, that was a sad time, but they wanted to take us to places where we would remember going and seeing. And that was a nice town. Southern Pines was a nice town. And we learned all these military songs. And it was so good to know. And the Star Spangled Banner and all of those songs. Everybody was into the military. They were loved their country and sang these songs, and always had prayer in church, in school. Now, I really did like that. And that's something they don't do now and don't allow, but we had the Pledge of Allegiance. it was just a good time and a bad time. And we left from there and got to come back to Stanley. When they got through at that particular time on the barracks, at the barracks that my daddy was working with. And then it wasn't, my mother and daddy built a house about 2 miles out of Stanley. And we had everything going pretty good. And he had to go off to another place and help build barracks. So we went to Jacksonville, North Carolina. And that was down at Camp Lejeune. That is where he helped build barracks down there then at Camp Lejeune. So I was in 5th grade down there, making new friends again. So I knew what it was like, the little children coming to us at school. When I was older, I thought about, what will I do when I grow up? And I thought, I don't know if I'd want to be a teacher or not, because you have to go in there and get to know all these little children and then leave and move around. And I thought, I just don't know. But anyway, I made the most of the situation. I made friends everywhere I went. And down at Camp Lejeune, they got through building there, and I was in 6th grade, I reckon. And we got to come back home. But the war still wasn't over. So my mother's got a job. She finally got a job there at a real nice place. She had already worked uptown in Charlotte on Main Street at the Wilder Building. And while she was there, she saw that one of the night spots was going to have a big sale, and they had a grand piano for sale. And it wasn't a baby grand, it was a grand piano. And my mother bid on it and got it. Well, we'd built a new house, so my sister was taking music, and she was playing, doing so well. And my mother got that big piano, and I thought the floor was going to fall through when they brought that huge piano in the house, but it didn't, thank goodness. And Sissy's first piece of music, sheet music, was I'll Never Smile Again. That was the name of the song. And honestly, she wore that song out. She was doing good playing then. She was doing real well. Well, she wanted me to sing, so I sang that song, I'll Never Smile Again, till I was blue in the face. And we had the best time at the piano. And it was so good to be back in Stanley again. I just felt like we'd been everywhere and left so much behind and everything, but everywhere we went, we made friends, and everywhere I found a church. I always found a church to go to. Sometimes my sister would go with me, and I didn't care what, if it's denomination, if Presbyterian, it didn't matter. If it's the one that was closest is the one I went to. But I was just so close and wanted to go because I'd heard about Jesus all my life. I loved Jesus. I loved the songs. So we did. That's just something we did. And we got back to Stanley, though. And then we had to go. Let's see. Oh, my mother got that job in Charlotte as a secretary to a head man, and was doing so well that she didn't want to leave her work. And my daddy had to go back down to Jacksonville, North Carolina. That time he didn't get a nice home. He couldn't find it. It was just like a town was just, people were living in tents, anything else that had grown so during the war. See, this war lasted about 10 years. And they were living in anything they could find. And so my daddy got the best he could get, and it wasn't like the first house he got when he took my mother down there. It was a brand new house. And she never was lazy. She got out with a shovel and shoveled up and had prettiest flowers growing and yard looking so good. And that time down at Jacksonville, that was a good one. That was all of our family. We were together, and my daddy took us out deep sea fishing, and I remember I caught 8 fish that day, and they were big fish out of the ocean. And so anyway, we had good times, and they always wanted to take us, like going to the polo game and then going out deep sea fishing, and all these things were growing experiences, but we were away from our friends and our loved ones in Stanley, so it was mixed feelings. But you know, we always had God with us. We always had God. And we were religious people. We were just caught in the middle circumstances, little children. You know, we just do what we have to do, and we make the most of it, and that's what we did. My sister was a quieter person, and she didn't meet people like I did, so she hung on to me, even though she was older, and we got along great. I did her talking just like for her, but we had a good time together, and I loved my sister very much. Well, when we were in Jacksonville the second time, the war it was getting close to being over, but it wasn't over. And my mother and daddy split up. She had that good job in Charlotte. My daddy had that good job at Jacksonville, North Carolina. And there we were. We had gone to stay with my daddy in the summer. As soon as school let out, he came by and got Sis and me, and Buck, my brother Buck. And we had a smaller baby. Well, he was 2 years old, David. And he stayed with my mother, and Buck and Sis and I went with our daddy. And that was a sad time because we'd always been together. But there was one thing we did. We prayed. We prayed and we prayed. And we had faith in God. And my daddy was so good to us. He wanted us to be happy. And he knew we weren't as happy as we should be. It was just so stressful with that war going on. And we were tired of it. And it had split families up. It had done... Anyway, he took us out one Sunday and was going to take us out to New River. And there were 2 or 3 boats, and people were on it. Well, I don't know. There wasn't but about 4 on our boat. Sis and myself, and then 2 other people. But anyway, we felt pretty much alone. And we went out. My daddy, we didn't even have a motor on our boat. My daddy and them, in his boat, in the crew, I think they had my brother with them, they towed us and pulled us out in New River. And honestly, that was a strange, weird place to be, because there was that old Spanish moss hanging all around in those trees. It was just spooky looking. And then the water was so black, and I never heard of so many animals and birds in my life that I had never heard before. But anyway, they were going to fish. The ones in the other boats were going to fish, but the boat that my sister and I were in, they kind of towed us out there, and we were just watching or waiting for them to catch some fish and come in. And I thought, my goodness, this is a terrible place to be. It was just, wasn't anything pretty. And that water was just, I don't know. I just wanted to be back home. And so it wasn't long. My daddy came with that boat that they were in, that my brother and them were in, and towed us back. And we didn't live but about 3 miles from New River, so it wasn't far to go. But anyway, I went home, and I looked out the window, and I'd always believed so much in God, trusted in God so much. And I didn't want my daddy to know that I was sad, because he had done everything he could do to make us happy. And I wouldn't even tell my sister that I could always talk to, but I went to the bedroom, and I looked out the window, and I prayed with all my heart and mind. And I said, God, please bring my mother back home. I want my family together again. Please bring us back together. And I thought, now how am I going to handle this? I can't tell my daddy that I'm this lonely. I can't tell anybody. I didn't even tell my sister. But I prayed and I prayed. Well, my sister got a letter from my mother. And she said, I'm coming home, and I want you to be in Stanley, and told us when to come on. She wanted us to come back. And I thought, oh, thank goodness. I thought, but how in the world will we handle this? I don't want to hurt my daddy. He's been so good to me. And so we just told him, we said, we want to go back to Stanley. And, you know, he was just happy for us. He really wanted us to. He thought, well, maybe this means we're going to get back together again. So he took us to the bus terminal down at Jacksonville, North Carolina, Onslow County. And he put us on the front row of this old bus, and it was as bad as any old school bus. It rattled and everything. You know, during the war, you couldn't even get gas hardly, and you couldn't get tires. And he took us down there, and he got down in front of me, because I am the talker in between Buck and Sis and me. And he said, she had said, don't tell your daddy, don't tell Ernest, but said I'm coming home. And I thought, well, I'm not going against my daddy, so what do I do? So we didn't volunteer anything. With the 3 children were sitting on the front row on the bus, and my daddy got down in front of us, and he looked at me and he said, Mary's coming home, isn't she? I said, yes, sir. I thought I was not about to tell my daddy a lie. I wasn't going to tell him a story. As good as he's been to us, as much as I loved him, and I thought, yes, even though they split up, I thought maybe they'll get back together. Well, he put us on that bus. He told us bye, and he was so sweet to us. And that was the longest ride I ever took in my life. That old rattly bus, and it was stopping at every pig path because nobody could drive. They didn't have gas. They didn't have tires. Things were rationed. It was just a bad time. And there we were. And they'd stop, people flagging the bus down to go into town. Well, we finally got to Charlotte. So we'd lived in Charlotte for a while. We knew that place good. I'd had skates and skated all over that place because gas was rationed. You had the freedom to be anywhere just about you wanted to be, ride bicycles and skate. That was the only good thing about the war, I reckon, was it gave us room to play. But anyway, we got to Charlotte. Well, we knew that town good, that city. And we caught a bus to come on into Stanley. And oh boy, we were so happy to get to our grandparents' house where I was born. And our aunt lived next door, came over, and we were crying and laughing and so happy. And the war wasn't quite over yet, but it was just about. And we knew we were going to get to go to Stanley School again and catch up with our friends that we'd been away from. And it was a mixed feeling. It was a time that you had so much hope and did a lot of praying and asking God to please get us back together as a family. Well, it finally happened. My daddy got to come up, and my mother and daddy got back together. I think they got married again. And we had that nice little house that we'd built. So we just got to move in that house, and as far as I remember, I think that big piano was still down there in that I thought was going to tear the floor up because it was so heavy, a big grand piano. But anyway, that just was the greatest feeling in the world to see my mother and daddy in the same car. And my daddy had bought a pretty convertible, and they had David standing between them, and they were going to our new house that we'd been split up and moved away. Oh my goodness, I was so thankful to God. He brought us back together again, and we were so happy. So the war was finally over, and all the boys, and they were all coming home. Well, by the time all of that was over, I was up to about 15 years old. And I got to come on in, and Mr. Kaiser was our principal. And I don't know, for some reason, he always wanted to help me out. He liked me, and I really liked him. And he would call on me to go down, and if a teacher was sick, he would call on me to go down and stay with the class to finish out the day because they needed somebody, and he knew that I would do it. He could depend on me. So he got me started to wanting to work at school. And my sister continued with her music, and she was the main one playing the organ there at that church, and she played there for 55 years. She was so dependable. She loved her church. And there I was having the best time dancing, going to dances and having a good time. But I loved art too, and I did a lot of art in school. Now that's something God gave me, and they would call on me at school to draw things, and I was always glad to. I enjoyed doing that. And God has just been so good to me all of my life through my tough times, sad times. I know what it's like to go through sad times. I also know that God is with you, always with you. All you have to do is call on Him. That's one person or one that you know you can call on and depend on. And that is the truth, because He did all my life. You know, when I was in about the 8th grade, I guess, and we were living down in our house. It was when we came back from Jacksonville. We always got the newspaper. It was the Charlotte News. And on Thanksgiving, it showed, I like to read the comic strips in there. And it showed at Thanksgiving the family of my favorite strip, comic strip. It was a girl that was dating, and she had a lot of boyfriends. And they were all sitting around the table, and that the uncle that she lived with prayed this sweet prayer. And it had it across the top of this comic strip. And I liked that prayer so much that I took the scissors and I cut it out of the newspaper. And I carried that in my billfold for years and years. I don't know what finally happened to it because I carried it on through I was married and all. But this is the way that prayer went. And it meant so much to me. I remembered it. And this is the way it went. Heavenly Father, in humble gratitude, we come to Thee this Thanksgiving Day. Our hearts are full of brotherly love, and we're truly thankful for all the many blessings that Thou hast given to us. Bless those less fortunate than we, and have mercy upon all mankind. Well, I loved that prayer, and I cut that out and carried it in my billfold. And you know what? We were having a big family gathering, and they always called on, my grandfather or a man to always say the prayer, Thanksgiving, and different occasions. And I said, could I say a prayer? And they said, yes. And it surprised my mother, said, well, yes, Faye. And I prayed that prayer. And my mother said, well, Faye, that's the sweetest prayer. And I thought, I've carried that one in my heart for a long time. And I was so thankful. And then our big Moore clan had a big get-together, and they called on me to have the prayer. But it's funny how things work. And they're a comic strip that nobody would have thought anything about. I carried that with me because it wasn't anything funny about it. That was down to earth. It was for real. And that stayed in my heart. But anyway, God is so good to us. And there the war was over and everything. And George Moore, now he was a distant cousin. And I knew him, but I didn't. I didn't really know him. I just knew him if I saw him. And he was so handsome. But, I had a boyfriend. And we had a good time. We'd go to horse shows. We'd ride. He so happened he had a horse. But we had a good time. But George and I started riding horses together. And he went to the Methodist church, and I went to the Lutheran. And we got together. And that was the best thing that ever happened, as far as I was concerned, because I met a person. Now, I had dated boys in high school, had a good time with them. I went to the parties, and George had been in the Marines. He fought in World War II and was over there on Guam and Iwo Jima and those islands and saw all that. He was a colonel's bodyguard, shot high expert. He learned to shoot a rifle out on the farm where he'd go squirrel hunting and bring the squirrels in. His mom would make pie out of it or some kind of stew. And he was brought up on a farm, but he graduated at Stanley High School. He was 7 years older. And I saw him once or twice when he came home on furlough, but I didn't know him really. And he had me to put his hat on one time. He wanted to get a picture of me with the big hat, not the little one. But he wanted to get a picture of me, and I thought, well, I don't know why he did that, but he got a picture of me. And I don't know what he did with it. Took it with him back to war or what he did with it. He was home on furlough when he got it. But anyway, somebody said, well, he fell in love with you a long time ago, Faye, but I didn't realize it. I was too busy, young, and, going to the ball games and the dances because I like to dance and having a good time. But I'll tell you one thing, God has always been in my heart and in my soul and in my mind. When I wake up first thing in the morning, I thank God for it. And that's just the way it is. And He's so real in my life. Well, anyway, I was a good girl. I didn't get into bad trouble. Never, ever. And then when But I tell you, I wasn't perfect either. And I enjoyed people, being around people and loving people and going places with them and just having a good time. God has been so good with me, even though there were bad times that just broke your heart. And you had to go to God and ask Him to help you through it, help you get your family back together again. Oh, well, God answered all my prayers. He is so real. I have had a wonderful life. I know the good times. I know the bad times. I understand people because I've been there. That's why when I worked at school with the little children, when George and I got together, well, we fell in love with each other. Now, we knew we were kin, but it wasn't like somebody kin to you. We just had a good time riding horses and everything, and we didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I know the one thing, there wasn't anything wrong with it because we had a wonderful marriage. And he's 7 years older, and I felt like he had sense enough to know what was right and wrong, and he was guiding me in the right direction because we were not wild, and he did not drink. He didn't drink, even though he had been in the Marines. Not one beer, nothing like that. We had the best, no drugs whatsoever. So anyway, we got married, and we've had 3 children, and been so happy. Had a little farm. It was a farm that his mother and daddy left him the land, gave him the land. And I couldn't have been happier. I had always had friends, and I had other boyfriends, but nobody compared to George Moore, the one that I really fell in love with. And we had a little farm, but he got sick. He had some problems with the war. He didn't want to talk about it. He never did want to talk about it because he was a colonel's bodyguard, and he saw a lot of fighting, a lot of killing. And his buddies that he went, 2 buddies that he had gone through school with, one got killed. And the colonel came to George and told him, said, "George, I hate to tell you, but said your buddy got killed. It was on Iwo Jima." And George he said he never wanted to come home so bad in his life. That was his buddy that he went through school Stanley with, Simon Ryan, little Jake Ryan. But anyway, we've both been through hard times. But the main thing, we didn't dwell on that because we had the best times and the best marriage. None of that, even though he felt he had to take Paxil at night that he would help him sleep good through the night because he would have those, we called them dreams, nightmares is what he called them. And he would jump out of bed at night, hollering sometimes. I didn't know what was going on, and I tried every way to make him comfortable, and I bought a big mattress, a big foam rubber thing, because he would jump out of bed some. Well, after a little while, a short while, I said, "We've got to go to the doctor and tell him." And it was the 50th anniversary of World War II. And they were showing all of those reruns of the war. And he was in the middle of it, on those islands in the Pacific, and it was terrible. That's all he saw was killing. And we went to the doctor, and he said, "George," and he got a Kleenex out of the box, Dr. Beatty in Mount Holly. And he wiped his eyes, the doctor did, and said, "Boy, George, you were just a young boy sent in there to do a man's job in the war in those islands and killing." Said this was so different from the way you were brought up in love and everything, and said, "You need," so he gave him 10 milligrams of Paxil is all he gave him. And he said, "Take this every night so you'll sleep." Well, that's the only thing George ever took. He took no other medicines, never used drugs, but he took 10 milligrams of Paxil, and he slept at night. And that's what kept him going and helped him. And he lived a normal life from that. But seeing all that replayed again brought it all back. And then with Dr. Beatty giving him the medication, he took that. And even till he died, they were giving him that one little pill, 10 milligrams of Paxil. But anyway, he was a good Christian man. You would never know that he even had those nightmares because he always had a smile on his face in daytime. The best personality. And I can't tell you how much I loved him, and I still do. And we know he told me when he kissed me and passed away, he told me, he said, "I love you more than anything in the world." And that was it. And you know, I didn't grieve a whole lot because what I did was thank God for 65 years George and I got to live together, husband and wife. And we loved each other so much from early morning to late in the evening. We'd had sad times in our life. That's why I can understand people. That's why I know when they go. That's why when little children, I worked at school for years, they would come in on Monday morning, they'd been with their mother maybe that week, and away from their daddy, and they were going to get to be with their mother or daddy sometime that day. They'd be crying. I held them on my lap. I loved those little children. I held them, and I had that feeling just like they had felt. I had felt. I understood them. So my hard times that I had, I called on God. I knew how much God would help you. And I taught those little children, just be sweet, be kind, and be good. You'll be okay. But I would hold them, and I didn't want to see them cry. I knew, I understood. So my bad times as a child through the war helped me to understand people of all kinds and love all kinds of people and teach them about Jesus, teach them about God. Just hang on to that because it's real and He's there for us. Well, anyway, that is my life, and I've got 3 grown children, and they're married, and I've got 5 grandchildren, and now they say you haven't lived till you have great grandchildren. I've got 1 great-grandchild, so I said, well, now I've lived, but I've got another one on the way. And God has been so good to me. That love from my grandparents when I was first born and squalling, they loved me, and I didn't ever cry much in my life. I've never been a crybaby, but I believe so strongly in God. That is the way to go, the only way to go, because He's your best friend, and He's with you always. And I hope I can help other people understand and know of God's love.